I look over him for a moment before shaking my head. It's nice to know you're such an optimist, Agent Mason. He slowly turns his focus to me, his eyes narrowing in inspection. A moment passes, and then he simply stares back at the building. Her pathetic attempts at humor don't actually help us get this over with. I thin my lips. Lip shaping. Now a new kind of lip shaping. Didn't Ava send you along because you're good with witnesses? I'm good at telling when people are lying, he replies matter-of-factly, and then extracting the truth when they do. A hint of pride hangs on his words. Nat steps up between us, gesturing to the door on the right. This is the apartment block? Yeah, I reply, placing my focus back on work. Our witness is Mr. Hudders, 65, lives alone, low income. Do you know of her? Nat asks. It's a small town. Oh, Mrs. Hudders, sorry. I'd like to contradict her, but it's true that I know most people living in Wayhaven. It's not, if not personally, then by reputation. Still, I know nothing of this woman. No, I don't, I reply, while moving up to the door and scanning the names beside buttons. I press the one marked Mrs. Frida Hudders. The speaker crackles to life, an older female voice echoing from it. Yes, hello, who is it, please? Hello, Miss Hudders. I'm Detective Vimes. I hope to ask you some questions. B, I'm with the police. C, my name is Sam Vimes, and I'm with the police department. May I come in? Oh my gosh, you know what? I just remembered that I chose her name. For some reason, it's like, oh, Vimes, that's a good name for a detective. And it's like, oh, right, I chose it. Numbskull. Anyway, pizza delivery for option D. That's, it's so funny. Let's stick with A or C. I'm gonna go with A. They're both, I don't know. I like the preamble of A, the hello, Mrs. Hudders, I'm Detective Vimes. That's fairly friendly. But C has my name is Sam Vimes. I'm with the police department. That's a little scarier. But may I come in? I like may I come in more than I hoped to ask you some questions because it's a little more generic. And I think it would put someone. It is less likely to make someone as defensive as I hoped to ask you some questions. That said, still gonna stick with A. Hello, Mrs. Hudders, I call into the speaker. I'm Detective Vimes. I was hoping to ask you some questions. Questions? Her voice becomes strained. See, what did I say? I am not sure I have need of a detective. It's about the murder, I continue, hoping to jog her memory. There's a pause, and then I glance back over my shoulder at the others. Then finally, there's a reply. Oh, you're with that lovely Officer Poe name, Mrs. Hudders chimes. Why didn't you say so? Come in. The door buzzes, and I grab the handle and yank it open, all of us heading inside. Inside, we travel through the first floor corridor until we reach apartment 6, where we find a woman waiting in her doorway for us. She smiles wide, a line of very obvious false teeth on full display. You're the detective! I give a nod, moving aside my jacket to reveal the badge on my belt. She doesn't even glance at it, which is unsurprising considering she already has to squint to see us. The heavy line of bright blue eyeshadow plastered onto her drooping lids probably doesn't help either, even if it does nicely match the color of her blue rinse hair. I turn to look at the two agents beside me, then back at Mrs. Hudders. My colleagues. It's as good a word as any to describe them. You're all very welcome, she says, holding out a pink, wrinkled hand decorated by heavy gold rings. I'm surprised don't weigh down her thin arms. I shake her hand, then follow her inside the small apartment. She leads us into the living room, the space bright and tidy, decorated in white wood and magnolia paint. I take a seat on the cream cotton sofa, and Nat moves to sit beside me, while Mason lingers to one side. Oh, you're a rather ruggedly handsome man, aren't you? Mrs. Hudders says to Mason, a chuckle to her words and a gleam in her eyes. Nat almost seems to burst out laughing at the distressed look on Mason's face as she speaks to him. Now then, my dears, she settles into the seat opposite us. What would you like to know about that terrible murder? A, ask if she knew the victim. B, ask about crime in the area. C, ask about the night of the murder. Let's go with A. Yeah, let's go with C. C. I've said A too many times, and I like to diversify my answers. I shuffle forwards, my knees nearly hitting the low, polished coffee table. Do you remember much from the night of the murder?
It was like any other night, really, she says, glancing down and frowning. Nothing out of the ordinary. I watched some TV, almost fell asleep because the show was so boring.
I half smile at her. My gaze shifts sideways as Nat glances purposefully at Mason, who eyes Miss Hudders before giving a stiff nod. I frown at the strange looks before focusing once again on the witness. Okay, so the same question as before. Did you know the victim? I lean forward, placing my hands on my knees. Did you know the victim? At all, Mrs. Hudders?
No, poor girl.
The old lady replies, letting out a heavy sigh.
We don't have many new people moving around here.
Once again, I'm distracted by Nat, shifting her focus to Mason, who once more stares at Mrs. Hudders before nodding sharply. I'm about to ask what exactly is going on when the elderly woman frowns deeply.
There was, she begins, before shaking her head and smiling. No, it's probably nothing.
We all focus on her much more intensely. Please, Mrs. Hudders, go on, Nat encourages, offering a soft smile with her words.
Well, I doubt it's useful, she shrugs, but I'm certain I heard someone singing in the alleyway.
Singing? I repeat. I don't know what I expected her to say, but it certainly wasn't that.
Not singing exactly, more like...
Chanting, Mason cuts in. The old woman points at him and nods.
Exactly, a mumbling chant of some kind.
The two agents once again share a tense look before Nat's brows shift into a heavy frown. Thank you, Mrs. Hudders, that's all we need, she says suddenly, rising from her place. She holds out a hand, which the old woman eagerly grips and shakes. We won't take up any more of your time. Wasn't this my witness? She slips her hand out of the woman's grasp before strutting over to Mason. They then both march out of the apartment, leaving me on the sofa, staring wide-eyed after them. I scramble to my feet, thanking her as well before having to nearly jog out of the apartment to catch up with them. They are already almost halfway down the hallway. Hey, is someone going to tell me what's going on? B, remember me, the detective, the one in charge of this case? C, would you please tell me what it is you obviously know? D, leaving so abruptly like that is a bit rude. No, these are all pretty good options, though. I'm going with B. Because again, leadership. Remember me? I call, the two agents pausing and looking at me. I'm the detective, the one in charge of this case? I stride towards them. A couple of residents peer out of their doors and down the bare-walled hallway at the noise. So if you know something, maybe now is a good time for the group to share? I don't answer to you, Mason sneers. Mason, go tell the others what we found, Nat says, quick to interrupt the sudden hostile remark. Mason shakes his head before turning on his heel and marching from the building. Nat is the one who walks back towards me, an apologetic smile on her face. I'm sorry, detective, she says, honesty in her tone. She shifts slightly. We didn't think we would get anything useful out of Mrs. Hudders. I cross my arms across my chest and quirk a brow. Really? The idea of chanting was your last straw? That's... My phone gives a shrill ring, interrupting Nat. Saved by the bell, I mutter, shoving the phone to my ear. Hello? Detective, it's Verda, he says, making me pause. I'm calling about the blood sample you found at the warehouse. Nat takes a wide step forwards? I can't even picture that. A sudden tension making her whole body stiff. Blood? Yeah, I reply, my brows raised in surprise that she can hear the conversation so clearly through the telephone. I had a run-in with some strangers at a potential murder site. One of them was injured, so I managed to collect a blood sample. I frown at Nat's reaction. The color drains from her face, and she swallows hard. Are you alright, agent? I ask. She shakes her head and attempts to smile at me, but I can see it's masking her worry. I'm fine. I shake my head. Keep going, Verda. Well, it's quite remarkable, but it seems to be similar, near on the same, in fact, to the strange blood in the victim. My eyes widen. What? I don't know who the sample is from, detective, but whoever they are should either be very ill or very dead, he pauses, or undead. Ooh, a zombie guy, that'd be cool. That's probably a vampire, though. A reverse vampire? Whatever. A, that can't just be a coincidence. B, great, now I have zombies from about town. C, that seems somewhat unlikely, Verda. Are you sure your tests are right? I'll stick with A, that can't just be a coincidence. That can't just be a coincidence! Maybe it is, Nat says suddenly, and I flick my gaze to her. Well, it's all a bit odd, isn't it? Do you really think this might actually be worth investigating time into, especially when the killer is still out there? I sigh. Any lead is better than none, which is what I had before. Well, except the chanting you were so offended by. Nat glances away. Yes, of course, you're right. I shake my head at her less than enthusiastic reply and return to the conversation with Verda. Thank you. Let me know when you get anything else. Will do, the doctor replies. I ended the call and slipped my phone back in my pocket. Maybe we should discuss all this back at the station, Nat suggests. I give a nod. This day is starting to get too weird to handle. Back in the office. Back in the office! Nat is kind enough to make us some drinks while we wait for the rest of her team to return. Sorry about the lack of coffee, I say as she grasps a steaming mug of tea in front of herself instead. She gives a genuine smile, taking the seat opposite my desk. No worries, I prefer tea anyway. Nat purses her lips. I'm sorry about what happened with Miss Hudders. We've worked as a small team for so long, it may take us some time to remember how to do things differently. I nod in understanding, turning the conversation back to the case after being reminded of it. Maybe it would be good to investigate the Ferris warehouse again, I say, voicing my thoughts aloud. I'm not exactly overly keen to return there after what happened last time, but at least now I can be more prepared. Nat leans forward in her chair, resting her forearms on her thighs. If you'd like, I can go with the rest of my team later. A. I am more than capable of going myself. B. Good idea. I can go with you. C. I'm not sure that's such a good idea. You're new around here. D. Are you sure? I don't want to pawn my responsibilities off on you. E. That's a good idea. Thank you. I'm gonna go with B. Good idea. I can go with you. I smile at her and give a nod. Good idea. I can go with you. She holds up a hand and gives an apologetic half smile. Actually, I was hoping you could go alone. I narrow my eyes at her, a little, leaning back in my chair. I only want to acquaint myself with the area, she replies, at my obvious suspicion, and have the chance to speak with my team about how best to work with others. I give a resigned sigh. All right. The niggles of anxiety that knotted my stomach settle somewhat. Might as well take advantage of having the extra people around for tasks like this. Are you sure you don't mind? She asks, concern in her tone, as her dark brown eyes settle on mine. You did make your objection quite clear earlier about us going about town on our own. Yeah, it's fine. Working with a team wasn't exactly what I wanted for my first case, but seeing as we have to, hopefully she really will manage to talk some sense into her team. Then we can all just get on with the case. At least you asked rather than demanded. I only object to overbearing, egotistical, "Oh, Ava, hello." My voice cracks and I almost spill my drink down my front in my haste to cut off my insult. Nat looks over her shoulder to the doorway where the rest of the team are entering. Any luck out and about? It yielded little, Ava replies. I shift in my seat as her gaze flickers my way. But I hear from Mason you had more luck. The detective and I have been speaking, and they suggested we check out one of the warehouses on the edge of town. Nat stands from her chair, moving closer to the group. They had an incident there with some possible suspects. Ava's gaze shoots to Nat so fast I'm surprised she doesn't topple over. And they agreed? I roll my eyes, sinking further into my chair and keeping my comments to myself, even more so when I see Felix grinning in the corner. Come on, Nat says, her tone light. We better get going before the sun sets. She glances back at me, giving an appreciative nod. See you tomorrow, detective. It was good working with you today. She offers a smile, along with a nod. Her expression... A, making me nod in return and say, yeah, see you tomorrow. B, making me smile back and say, good working with you too, see you tomorrow. C, making my stomach flutter a little. I can't help but smile and say, see you tomorrow. D, making me grin back and say, I'm very much looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. A, keep it cordial. I nod in return, sitting a little straighter in my chair. Yeah, see you tomorrow. Ava gestures for the group to leave, all heading out of my office at the same time. I watch them leave the station. The exact moment they do, Tina pops her head around my door. What was that? She asks, her eyes shimmering. I shift a couple papers on my desk. Nothing. What was what? She shuffles into the room, her curls bouncing around her face as she comes to perch herself on the edge of my desk beside me. I'm sorry, but 4 people who look like that in your office is not nothing. A, as attractive as they may be, they are here to help me on the case. B, it's all just professional. C, okay, I get what you mean. It's going to be rather distracting having them around. D, their looks don't match their personalities, unfortunately. Or E, they work for the government. I think that would make them off limits. I don't like conceding the fact that they're attractive. I don't want to admit that in any way, shape, or form. Don't know that's really an option. No, all of these at least have that as some pretty fat subtext, if not even surtext? Protext? What's the opposite of subtext? Text? So which poison do we want? It's all just professional. It's the least admitting one, I think. It's all just professional, Tina, I replied, glancing up at her. They work for my mother, and she has lent them to me for the duration of the case. Lent them to you? Her eyes widen, and she gives a laugh, sliding down into the chair beside my desk. I wonder if she can let me borrow a couple. I throw her a withering stare, to which she spreads her hands out in front of her in feigned innocence. Come on, you can't blame me for thinking it, she says. I mean, did you see them? Yes, I saw them, I reply with a chuckle. At least that's a start, I suppose, she says, pouting her lips. When was the last time you even thought about spending some time on your love life? Ugh, I don't want to talk about this. A. I date all the time. B. It's just so much effort to the dating scene. C. I have enough in my life right now. I'm not sure I can handle more. D. So it's been a while since I've had a date, or maybe a little longer than a while. E. I don't open up easily, that's all. F. Can we not talk about this, please? Let's stick with C. I like C. I have enough in my life right now, I admit, slumping into my chair. I'm not sure I can handle much more. I suppose if that's how you really feel, she stands from her place, smiling so genuinely it makes her eyes crinkle. Just remember, you're a detective now, Sam. You've reached pretty high in your career. You're allowed to enjoy the rest of your life too, you know. I purse my lips. If I had a drink for every time, I'd be dead. Then I tap a few keys on my computer so the monitor flashes to life, unsure how to respond to Tina. You're a strong, independent person, she continues, and I flicker my gaze over the top of my screen to meet hers. You deserve a strong, independent person at your side. Another smile curves her lips, and it wouldn't hurt if they were easy on the eyes, right? I finally crack out a grin. All right, I get your point, but this murder takes priority right now. Oh, that reminds me, she says, pausing on her way out. I came in here to tell you I found out who the victim was. A heaviness hits me like a brick to my chest. Who was she? Janet Greenland, Tina says, her brows shifting into sympathy. Poor girl. She was an engineer. She was here looking for a place to rent, trying to get away from the crime of the big city. Kind of ironic, isn't it? She turns and leaves, a somber air having fallen over my office at the news. I turn my focus back to my computer, hoping I might be able to figure out what to do next. Later that night, near the center of town. You weren't a handsome man, were you, Dr. Murphy? The new Dr. Ethan Murphy says, glancing down at my photo ID badge now pinned to his jacket. Replacing the photo with his own would have to be done soon, but that could wait until tomorrow. Feeding had to be his focus now. Murphy darts through the shadowed streets, frowning when the buzz of the lamppost makes his head ache. He does much better in moonlight only, so he heads towards one of the darker areas between the flat, boring buildings. There has to be someone around, even in this backwater hole of a town, he mutters. He scans the back doors of the apartment buildings. They line the walls like fridge doors down this aisle of a supermarket. The scent of humans inside seeps through the bricks, searing his nose, and he muffles his hungry groans with his hand. He hasn't fed in weeks, which was a mistake. His last failed experiment had to be due in part to his hunger. Eating straight from the source is not his preferred method of fulfilling his needs, but he has little choice due to being run out of his accommodations by that stupid pack of agents. So they caused this. Murphy's lip curls in disgust. Just the thought of them makes his skin itch. The agency is useless. A bunch of power-hungry humans and their supernatural pets. Murphy spits onto the street. The thought of them leaving a vile taste in his mouth. Having to live in the shadows rather than taking their place at the top in this world, and all because of fear of the agency's wrath. It is beginning to wear thin on many of his kind. Killing the unit that had resided in Wayhaven had helped to dispel some of his pent-up rage. It had also been somewhat of a perk when he'd overheard them speaking about another potential victim in this town. Of course, they hadn't revealed anything further upon him asking. Torture isn't his forte, even if death is. Still, learning there is another potential victim out there has given him hope once more, when he had feared his last attempt was the final one. Wayhaven isn't that big. He'll find this new one eventually, and once he has them, crushing the agency will be like crushing ants beneath his boot. A smile tugs at his pale lips, his steps speeding with renewed intent. The time of the agency and their coddled supernaturals will be at an end soon enough, but for now, feeding has to be his priority. That fact is made obvious by the stinging of his dry throat and the pain which laces through his blood. It really has been too long since he's fed. Yet even in a careful town like this one, lost lambs continue to stray from their flock. Is this the end of the chat? Okay, end of the chapter, last page. Murphy draws to a stop at the exit of an alleyway. Lamplight pools down onto the pavement below, highlighting a slim figure bundled up and marching so fast through the opposite alleyway they're almost sprinting. Probably afraid of what lurks in the shadows, Murphy chuckles at the thought. In a flash of movement, he steps out in front of the walker. The youthful face of the young boy stares back at him wide-eyed. Where did you come? He stammers. Shh, Murphy coos, taking the boy's hand in both of his and staring into his eyes with unwavering intensity. Why don't you relax? For a few seconds, the boy struggles to yank his hand back, but the resistance finally melts. The boy's cornflower blue eyes. Is that blue? Or is that yellow? They mist over anyway, and an absent-minded smile lands on his lips. Murphy grins wide, one arm seizing the boy's waist and yanking him closer. His free hand tips the youth's head to one side. The boy's satchel drops from his shoulders, collapsing onto the ground and spilling out a variety of colorful school textbooks. He didn't need to make quite that much of a mess of the boy, but then it's always fun to leave such a discovery for those persistently intrusive agents. End chapter 4. Did I say chapter 3 like 3 episodes ago? Well, that was the end of chapter 4, right? Can I even count? Ooh, who knows? Anyway, that was the end of a chapter. Thanks so much for watching, guys. More to come. Signature catchphrase.